Our brains are clearly physical because they're made out of matter. Our minds, however, our thoughts and our feelings, those are clearly not made out of matter. Is there still a way that they could be physical though? Let's consider. Hello philosophers, my name is Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Could the mind be physical? Well, like most things in philosophy, we want to make sure that we have our terms clear before we actually start answering those kinds of questions. So what exactly do we mean by physical? For example, I have my little Lego guy here, Metamorpho, and I can ask the question, why is Metamorpho considered physical? He clearly is physical, but why is he physical? Well, one thing that you could answer is because he occupies some kind of space. He has some kind of three-dimensionalness to himself, right? He has some kind of volume. And in fact, this is the way that a philosopher, Rene Descartes, defined the word physical. He took it to mean takes up some kind of space, or I should say is extended into space. So for Descartes, the word physical really just means spatial. And by spatial, he just means extended into space. Now, the brain clearly occupies space. It has some kind of a volume to it. Does the mind take up space? Is there some kind of volume to the mind? No, there's clearly not some volume to the mind. You know, if you think about your thoughts aren't taking up some kind of space in your head. Otherwise, the more you think, the more crowded your brain would get. So if by physical we mean spatial, then the brain, yes, is physical, but the mind is not. But is that a good definition for physical? If you think about it, modern physics has showed us a lot of things that just are not spatial in this way. So for example, a photon. Photons are those bizarre kinds of things that are light. Kind of act like a particle, kind of act like a wave. But what they don't do is they don't take up any kind of space. And yet we would clearly call them physical. I mean, we have laws that they obey that we study in science. So photons would be physical even though they don't occupy space. Then probably this wouldn't be a good definition of physical. Why else might we say that Metamorpho here is physical? Well, one thing you might think is because he's made out of stuff, right? He's made out of matter. Plastic to be specific. The fact that he's made out of matter seems like a good reason to call him physical. So what if we define the word physical to mean material, made out of some kind of matter? Well, the brain is also made out of matter, so the brain would be physical. But is the mind made out of matter? Think about, let's say, a thought of a truck. If you have a thought of a truck, is that a material thought? No, because then you'd have a material truck going through your head, and that'd be very painful. So if by physical we mean material, then the brain would be physical, but the mind would not be physical. Then again, that might not be a good definition for physical. Our best science tells us that energy is more fundamental than matter, and energy is clearly not made out of matter. Do we really want to say that energy is non-physical? Again, we have laws of science that energy follows. So it'd be weird to say that energy is not physical. So if we don't want to say something is physical because it takes up space or it has matter, then why would we say it's physical? Why say Metamorpho is physical? Well, one reason I might say that he's physical is because I know that he's going to follow the laws of physics. I know if I throw him a particular way, I can calculate his trajectory. I know that since he's made out of a specific kind of plastic, then if I heat him up to some degree, he's going to melt. And I know what degree that, well, I don't know, but I could figure out what that degree would be. I know that it'll last forever in a landfill. And why do I know all these things? Because he's subject to the laws of physics. Now, the brain also operates according to the laws of physics. There's an interesting thought experiment by this mathematician named Laplace. People usually call it Laplace's demon. Imagine I don't know why it's a demon, by the way, but imagine a super intelligent being that knew where every atom was in the universe. This being also knew all the laws of physics and could instantaneously calculate, given those physical laws, where every atom would go. The demon would be able to predict the future, and it would be because all of these different atoms are following very specific laws. Well, the brain would be included in that scenario. Laplace's demon would be able to say, given where all the atoms are in this brain, this is the next thing that's going to happen. So if by physical we mean follow the laws of physics, then it seems like the brain would definitely be physical. Would the mind be physical in this way? Would it be describable by the laws of physics? Would Laplace's demon know what was happening in the mind? That's an interesting question. When we say mind, we're talking about mental things. What do we exactly mean by the mental? Well, we could take the strategy that we just used for the word physical and define mental as describable and explainable by psychological concepts. So we have things like thoughts, reasons, desires. And when we're talking mind, we're using those kinds of concepts. Now, it might be tempting to say, okay, well, in physical, we're talking about describable by physics. In mental, we're talking about describable by psychology. Clearly, those are two different things, but not so fast. Think about biology. Now, biology is not physics. Biology is the study of things insofar as they're living, insofar as they are organisms. And when we're doing biology, what we're interested in is how living things go about continuing to live. But does that mean that these living things that we're studying biologically do not follow the laws of physics? No. What's interesting is that the physicist can look at the exact same thing that the biologist is looking at and describe it using the laws of physics and describe it using these concepts of physics. The biologist, however, has a different interest, has a different thing that she's trying to do. So although, yes, these things, these living organisms are following the laws of physics, the biologist is more interested in how are these things functioning as living beings. So just because a thing is physical doesn't mean it's not also biological. And in the same way, just because something is mental doesn't necessarily mean that it's not physical. Now, it's important to note, what have we shown here? Have we shown that the mind is a physical thing? No, far from it. All that we have shown is that the physical and the mental are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So going forward, we're going to look at some more views that say that the mind is a physical thing. What we've done so far is just to show that these things aren't just outright false. And in fact, one reason people give to think that the mind would be physical is a view called physicalism, the idea that only physical things exist. Now, if only physical things exist and the mind exists, then obviously the mind's got to be physical. So of course the question then is, do we have good reason to think that only physical things exist? Do we have any reasons to think that non-physical things do not exist? That's something we're going to be checking out very soon. So subscribe and get those notifications so that you will be alerted when we get our next video on philosophy of mind. That's all I got for today. Adios.